next theme is EVs in the automotive retail space, how OEMs and dealerships are partnering to bring EVs to the mass market. To introduce the panel is Jonathan Collegio, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for NADA. Jonathan is responsible for the organization's communications and marketing efforts and has extensive experience in public affairs spanning both political and corporate work. Jonathan.
Welcome our three guests today. We have Michael Alford, who is a full-line General Motors dealer in Jacksonville, North Carolina, who also serves as chairman of NADA. We have John Bozella, who is president and CEO of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which is the chief advocacy organization for auto manufacturers in Washington, D.C. And then we have Mike Stanton, president and CEO of NADA, John's counterpart on the dealer side, of course, sponsor of the conference today. So John, let's get started with you. In terms of EV adoption, there are three chief drivers. You have kind of the government side, incentives, disincentives, the carrots and the sticks. You have the OEM product production targets. Of course, Honda made a big announcement today on EVs. But then you also have kind of the gritty reality on the ground, consumer sentiment, consumer appetite, which is the reality that dealers kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis. Where is public policy vis-a-vis industry and consumers? Are we in line? Are we over our skis? Where are we?
Yeah, you know, that's a really great question to start with, because I think all of those elements are important and all of those elements need to be aligned. Let's start with product leadership. You're seeing a tremendous amount of product leadership. We heard Jose Munoz talk about product leadership in the EV space. We're seeing it across the industry. Just a quick way to think about it, I'd say there are probably roughly 70 unique models in the marketplace that are EVs. And when I say EV, I mean battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric, and hydrogen fuel cell. That number is probably going to be about 130 by mid-decade. And when you think about investment numbers, by the end of the decade, the industry will have invested $515 billion globally in electrification. So even in Washington, D.C., where I come from, that's real money. So you're seeing leadership. In the marketplace, sales have doubled over the last year. We heard that from J.D. Power and from your chief economist earlier today. The policy area is where there's some challenges, and that's in two spaces. There's the regulatory drivers, right? We need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We need to improve fuel economy. That number is really driving the industry effectively to zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. That's an enormously aggressive and challenging environment. I'm not sure the rest of the conditions in the marketplace today can really support that. What we really need is a much broader national strategy that supports demand with regard to consumer incentives, that definitely invests even more than we're seeing now in infrastructure, and then focuses also on supply chain. We don't yet have the critical raw materials and the battery manufacturing capabilities here in the United States to make sure that we have affordable product in the marketplace to respond to where I think demand's going to be at the end of the decade.
Mike Stanton, you've written 4 articles for Automotive News on dealers and electric vehicles. Of course, the theme of the NADA show last month was all about electric vehicles. I know that NADA has done a ton in getting dealers ready, but where is the dealer community on EVs? Are they ready to go?
You know, thank you, Jonathan, and you bet dealers are ready, and we're all in, as you all have heard. But I think it's important to bring up that there's never been a time that I can remember anyway that we need to work together in a cooperative fashion, and that involves working with the car companies and also getting it right with the government in terms of infrastructure and making sure that these incentives actually work in the showroom. So, you know, we're dependent on the manufacturers to make great product, and it's coming. A lot of it's already here. We need the government to make the right decisions to make sure that they're pushing these goals forward, because they're big goals. But dealers are all in, and you know, it's one thing to say it, but we need to point to the investments that dealers have made to get electricity to the store, the facilities, the tools, the training. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars at each dealership, but that equates to over $2 billion, probably closer to $3 billion when we're said and done overall. So the investment is significant. And that's what we mean when we're talking about all in. But we've also, I applaud your members for recognizing that dealers are a competitive advantage. And we are essential to making sure that these vehicles are delivered to the mass market. We've got over 16,500 locations. We've got over 1 million employees that are ready to deliver on these aggressive targets. So we're in this together. It's the only way we're going to get it done. And again, it's one thing for me to say it, but it's another thing for our customers to say it. And I think you all will find Mike DeVorny's presentation later today very interesting.
John, just to follow up, in any advocacy organization, there's limits on resources, time, your attention, the amount of money that you can spend. Are EVs sucking the air out of the room in your trade association's general efforts, or where do they line up?
Yeah, we can't afford to pick our fights and our policy discussions, but this is definitely a major focus of our organization's efforts and the industry at large. It's critically important that we stay competitive as an industry here in the United States. And so there is not only an imperative to reduce emissions, but there is, in fact, more importantly, in my view, an imperative to be competitive on the global stage to make sure that we're not only building here for US customers, but we're building here for export around the world, and we're creating a vibrant, competitive, successful car market for the future here in the United States.
Michael Alford, Mike Stanton gave the refrain, dealers are all in. At the ground level for a dealership, there's a lot of meaning behind that because there are a lot of investments in people and infrastructure and equipment, facilities. Talk about what that's like on the ground as a dealer in North Carolina.
I think for all of us, it's an important time. It's the advent of the electrification of the fleet, and we have responsibilities to, thankfully, we've had good years because we need the working capital to deploy and charging infrastructure. We're working with our local utilities to make certain that they can meet the power demands and requirements we're having. We're trying to source the charging infrastructure that we need, and there's some scarcity there, and there's inflation there. At the same time, we're training our service technicians, we're buying lifts, we're making certain that we have safety protocols to ensure that we operate these heavy batteries properly, if you will, and then we're also modeling the future of our business in terms of any degradation to our fixed ops, while at the same time preparing for the transition from ICE to EV. So, I think dealers are really excited and are all in, but we're also dealing with the realities of this dynamic, and I think we look forward to seeing how quickly these incredible products that we're seeing coming down the line. We're also working with sort of an ecosystem and an omni-channel cooperative approach with our OEMs, and I think that conversation is ongoing. With GM, we have a digital retail platform that we'll be coordinating and selling through. So a lot of exciting times, and but a little bit daunting at the same time. But every dealer I talk to, their aperture is open. They see what's coming, and they accept the responsibility we have. And we're entrepreneurs. We're going to make it work, and we're going to be successful.
That's good. You talked about recharging. I had spoken to a dealer outside from Florida. He talked about $1.5 million investment that they made in recharging at his dealership. John, I think most of us in the room, or certainly many of us, have driven EVs. They're comparable, if not, exceedingly, comparable to ICE in performance. There is this challenge of recharging, both in terms of where you can charge and how long it takes to recharge. Talk about what that looks like from a policy perspective, because that's not just a government thing, that's also an OEM thing.
No question about it. And by the way, I would quarrel slightly with your premise. They're more fun to drive, at least in my view. I'm an EV driver, and the torque is amazing. The vehicle, because of its weight dynamics, goes exactly where you point it. It's a phenomenal, type of car to drive. And so I'm really excited to see more of these in the marketplace and experience more of our member companies' great products. So the charging is a concern, right? Because you're seeing more and more product come into the marketplace. I'm concerned that charging infrastructure isn't keeping up. We've seen an important down payment made in Washington in a bipartisan infrastructure bill that just passed a few months back that devotes $7.5 billion of federal funding to high-speed public charging infrastructure. And that's important. A lot of that money is going to be to connect metropolitan areas so people can feel comfortable getting from point A to point B at a time when there isn't really, in my view at least, sufficient infrastructure. So, but it's going to take more than that. It's going to take private sector engagement, investors in infrastructure as well as utilities that see an opportunity. We're doing a couple of things here. We're working with the federal government to make sure that $7.5 billion is well spent, that it's spent in a way that supports consumer demand, but also recognizes equity concerns here. Like, we got to make sure that everybody participates in this market opportunity. And then the second thing we're doing is we've identified 2 players in the infrastructure space, what the typical attributes of a charging station ought to look like. And I don't know about you, if you're driving around from point A to point B in an electric vehicle today, these things I'm about to tell you, they seem logical, but they're not true in the marketplace today. The place should be well lit. The charging station should work. When you get there, you should be able to use a credit card, like basic stuff. And so we've laid out a series of attributes which we're throwing them all around the place. We're saying these are the types of things that customers are going to need when they take that EV off the dealership lot and drive into, drive not only home, but shopping and everywhere else they're going.
Are you optimistic that it's going to pass this year?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I think the number of vehicles per charging station is growing. That would be a concern to me. If we keep getting more and more vehicles per charging station, that would suggest that we're going to hit the pace of e-growth may be bumpy or lumpy as a result of that. We need to be dealing with that issue right now.
Mike Alford and Mike Stanton, just in terms of the retail issue generally, for 100 years, OEMs have embraced the dealer model. It's evolving. It's not static. If you kind of think of it as a spectrum of on one side, the dealers taking the inventory from the manufacturers and then they own the relationship with the customer from that point on. But the other side would be direct sales. There is an evolution toward a more cooperative, as you talked about, a more cooperative environment between OEMs and manufacturers. Just talk about what that looks like and what dealers can expect as this changes.
You go first.
I think the OEMs are looking at being more efficient, and we're looking at opportunities as well to be more efficient at the retail level. But the most important thing is that these customers that we interact with every day, that come to our dealerships, have coffee, get their vehicle serviced, they know us, they trust us. And that component, I think, is absolutely essential going forward to scaling EVs to John Q. Public, right? It's a different dynamic than what EVs have been to date, and we alluded to that earlier. I do think that we need to meet the customer where they are in the journey, and if they want to be 100% digital and work through a digital retail platform, and we source that vehicle through working with the OEM, and so it's pretty seamless from tier 1 to tier 3, how that works. That's where that cooperative dynamic needs to really, really work well to meet the disruptors that are trying to impact both of our livelihoods. So that's where the work is taking place, and I think it's exciting because I think it's going to enhance speed, efficiency, CX, customer experience, but at the same time, we have those relationships with these customers, and that will be ultimately our competitive advantage to these disruptors.
Yeah, Mike?
Well, and Mike said it better than I will, but I'll take a bit of a different path. At NADA, we exist. We have one mission, and that's to advocate for dealer interest. And we do that via our dealer attitude survey. We also have meetings with each of the OEMs, and John and I talk on a regular basis. And I think there's been a healthy tension. Dealers want to sell cars, they want to service, they want to sell parts. OEMs want to do the same thing. We don't always agree on the best way to get that accomplished. I think that is a healthy tension. But Mike had mentioned the customer. The customer doesn't care about any of that tension. The customer wants a great product and they want a great experience at the point of sale and throughout the life cycle of the vehicle. And I think that the OEMs working with their dealers that do that the best will succeed in the marketplace. That, in my opinion, is the winning formula.
Mike Alford, just to follow up on that. So traditionally, the dealer, maybe the general manager would be the point of contact with the regional person at the factory. Are you actually seeing more kind of mid-level contact between the dealership and the OEM partners? Is that where it's moving?
I think we've always had some of that. Absolutely right now. I mean, the tension for us in terms of getting more product to meet the demand that is out there right now, any way that we can. I mean, the logistics dynamic. I mean, we're so much more involved in the logistical aspect of getting a built vehicle to a showroom floor. And every dealer here has probably sent their own drivers to pick vehicles up to get them in to meet a customer's desire, a customer want, an opportunity to deliver a vehicle. And the OEMs are working with us on that. I mean, they are dealing with rail and the shortage of truck drivers. So absolutely, we're working more together from a blocking and tackling standpoint than I can remember in the past. And I think that will absolutely continue. The other dynamic I also have always seen that in this business, unfortunately, the timing of supply and demand doesn't always equal. Yeah. There'll be a time when there's more supply than demand, and they're going to want, us to take those vehicles and do what we do, move that metal and sell it, right? And that's it. Hopefully we'll never get back to a pre-COVID inventory day supply, but we as dealers will deal with that if we have to. We always have.
John, you have a number.
One thing I'd like to add quickly is, we're at this time, we're talking a lot about electric vehicles, and electric vehicles this is not what we're talking about. EVs are one thing, and there is no reason that there should be a different way to sell an electric vehicle. There are all kinds of digital things that are happening to ICE vehicles as well.
That's a good point.
And all, this supply constraint in the market right now, I mean, think subscriptions, reservation systems, data sharing, all of these things are discussions that need to be had, but they're not related to the EV. It's just the timing. And those are the things that we need to work out, and that's where we are engaged with the manufacturers, and our job is to support the councils and develop positions on these things.
John Bozella, is there, all of your members have embraced the dealership model. Is there a difference in selling EVs as there is in ICE?
I don't see it. I'm frankly puzzled by this argument. I'm an EV manufacturer. I've got to have a different go-to-market strategy. Really? The laws are pretty clear. It's pretty obvious what you have to do to go to market. So I don't see it. It's a bit of a confluence of different arguments, I think, is what Mike Stanton's talking about. Look, I think the opportunity here for manufacturers and dealers is to work together to bring the customer all along on this transformative journey. That is our opportunity. I think the vast majority of companies I work with every day see that opportunity. Working with dealers to be able to educate customers, to be able to service vehicles, to be able to introduce customers to new forms of mobility. That's where the shared opportunity is, no matter what the actual technology on the ground is.
A lot of talk here about cooperation. I don't know that this is by accident, and I know that you wouldn't have heard about this level of cooperation 5 years ago at a conference like this. How did this happen? Mike Stanton.
Well, there have been some developments, and I would say some new opportunities. We talk about less about dividing the pie and maybe more about growing the pie, and to be frank, to make sure that dealers get their fair share of that pie growth. So this has created an opportunity to have a better relationship with the customer. We think more revenue, but we need to cooperate to address these opportunities. I don't view them so much as challenges. It's just a great chance to sort through all of this, and that's going to be done with dealer councils and dealers one manufacturer at a time. And again, I think the ones that figure it out the quickest are the ones that are going to profit.
Mike Alford, you talked about inventory. This is, of course, not just an issue on EVs, but with ICE generally. What does that look like? Is there light at the end of the tunnel as a dealer from North Carolina?
Yeah, I think our economists today laid that out pretty well. I would say that from Vegas to here, my timeline's been pushed out a little bit. So, I think it's going to be well into 23 before we start to see product that we want to see as dealers. And I do think that tension on demand is happening every day. There's a lot of demand still out there despite some of the enhanced cost of capital and economic headwinds. But, we'll get through this. We'll work through this. And it's a great time to be in this business. And I think the opportunity to engage with our OEMs on these big issues is imperative. I mean, I think we're very symbiotic, and we have issues that are being thrown at us in Washington that we both have to work through in a big, big way, and I think we will.
John, 5 years ago, 2017, you couldn't have gone to a conference like this except for instead of talking about EVs, we'd be talking about autonomous vehicles. And this topic has just completely disappeared from conferences like this. But they haven't gone away. Yeah. So tell us about where are OEMs on AV deployment, production, regulation?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I just want to build on the last comment, though, about innovation. Sure. And about the opportunity. I think there's no question we're seeing innovation in the marketplace, not only with regard to the vehicle and the technology in the vehicle, but also with regard to how we're engaged with the customer. And so it is important that we do continue to look at innovation, embrace innovation, and make sure that we see that in the retail area as well as with regard to the product. Now, to AVs, it hasn't gone away at all. First of all, what you're seeing is the building blocks of AV technology in vehicles in the marketplace today in the form of active safety systems, cameras, radars, sensors, and computing technology that are helping to steer and manage vehicles. And so the operation of vehicles. You're also seeing, with regard to AVs, highly automated vehicles, more and more deployments in the marketplace. But here's what's happening. We've moved from research and development to now the exploration of business models and business cases that are about to come into the market. The challenge we have is we don't have a policy roadmap here in the United States to encourage the further testing and deployment of highly automated vehicles on public roads. Until we have that policy roadmap, I don't think we'll see the breadth of deployments that are really required in order for us to really make that shift. But there's no shortage of R&D, there's no shortage of testing and deployment. And again, I would come back to ADAS or automated driver assistance systems. A lot of that technology is making driving safer today.
So 5 years ago, the talk was that there was going to be a jump to level 5, a revolution. This is more of an evolution to level 2, 3, 4 innovation.
I think that's right. You have certain innovators and manufacturers that do see a level 4, level 5 future. In other words, self-driving, and you see probably other manufacturers that represent a much larger percentage of the new vehicle marketplace that are in the process of exploring driver assistance systems. Think about it as a guardian angel as opposed to a chauffeur.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining. Great conversation here. Thank you.
Thank you, John.